If you've been a follower of mine for a while, you will know that for the last sort of month and a half, we've been talking quite a lot about the downfall of the collapse of the South African economy. And some of you in the comments have said, What do you mean we're in the process of collapsing? It's already collapsed. All of that's fine, right? I love the jokes and I really appreciate you guys commenting and subscribing and all the stuff. But here, I want to talk about something else that continuously sort of pops up in conversation, both on X, where I have a lot of these conversations with people every single day, as well as just in my comment section. There seems to be a genuine belief in South Africa, at least, that what is happening is on purpose. The government is doing this on purpose in order to grab power. And I thought this would be a really interesting sort of position to explore. Now, before we get into it, I want to make one thing super, super clear. We can empirically examine the data, analyze what the data is telling us, and then extrapolate from that empirical facts about the economy. We can even empirically say that every single thing that is going wrong with the South African economy is as a result of the South African government, the ANC, and their asinine economic policy. How do we know that we can say that empirically? Well, first, we can examine it, right? But second, every single time the government has come up with a new asinine policy, they've been warned by the public as well as economists that, hey, this policy that you're now enacting is going to have the following consequences if you go through with it. They went, screw you, we're going to be doing it. Anyways, it won't happen, you're full of shit. And then it actually happens exactly as they were warned, oftentimes even worse than what they were warned. And then they turn around and go, well, it must be apartheid, right? But we can know because we can see what they're doing. The warnings play out exactly the same way. And here we are, right? So we can say empirically what the economic situation is in South Africa. We can say empirically that the ANC and the ANC alone is to blame for that. When we get to the area of is this on purpose or not, this is where we exit the world of empirical evidence and we enter the world of speculation. Now, we can do phenomenal speculation by looking at the analytics, looking at the data, looking at the empirical evidence available to us. But at some point, we're going to have to leave the empirical facts behind and just speculate. Because unless we can get an actual document from within the bowels of the Luthuli house that says, hey, we the ANC, we're going to destroy the economy of South Africa for XYZ reason, we're never going to have that document unless someone in the NEC grows a conscience, and I'm not holding my breath for that. So let's talk about the most likely scenario, right? And we have effectively two. The first is that the ANC is doing this on purpose, that they are the ones enacting it. And then there's the second one, which I think is actually the far more likely one, and that is that the ANC genuinely just does not know what they're doing. And I'll tell you why I think that is the most likely scenario. The ANC adheres to communism. And in my last video, I explained to you structurally why communism fails consistently. And I can even show it to you because I decided to spend some time with Grok to actually hash out a table for you guys to show just how inefficient government spending in South Africa is. This is for every 1 rand of tax that the government of South Africa collects from the people. Government salaries and bloat makes up 59 cents, or more importantly, 59% of the 1 rand tax bill. You'll see here that it says 45%, and that's because for every 1 rand that the government of South Africa actually collects, it ends up spending 1 rand 30 in the economy in some way, shape, or form. Just to be clear, when we talk about government bloat, we're talking about things like salaries, compensation of employees, bloat and overheads, goods and services for the government, and a bunch of others. So basically anything that the government requires to operate. That's 59 cents for every 1 rand that the government gets in. None of this has been spent on the people yet. Then we get to the spending on the people, right? Where they spend about 48 cents on the people. But before you get too excited about this, you'll find that service delivery, this is transfers and subsidies, makes up a big chunk of this. So this is on education, health allocations, hospitals, and the like. Then you have economic spending, and this is where we get into them paying all of these ACOs, right? The state-owned SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, and also the social wage bills, where they actually just give people grants, and all of the grant people that obviously stand and wait for their money every single month. So you very quickly realize that this isn't actually service delivery, which is the point of taxes, which is what most people pay their taxes for. Most of this is to make up for the terrible spending of the government that's destroying the economy. So this is known as spending inefficiency, and the South African government's spending inefficiency is miserable, right? So out of R1.30, because they also borrow a bunch of money in order to actually make up all the money that they don't have, right? Only 37% of that money is actually spent on the people. But it's not really spent on the people because, technically speaking, I would have a problem with some of this. So, for example, where it states that it's focusing on things like social grants, here, for example, social grants and health and education, I would argue that that should go with salaries, because it's the same thing as a salary, right? The government is paying a bunch of government employees to do nothing. The government is paying a bunch of citizens to do nothing. Yeah, it's the same thing, right? So I would actually argue that the biggest chunk of this, which is by far, you can see here, 750 billion rand, is spent every single year just on that, right? Social grants. That should actually be taken out of this group and added into this group, because it's the same thing. But never mind that, right? So that's the structural failing of communism. Why communism and socialism structurally never actually works. But let's talk about, because I think the thing that actually fails communism every single time is the philosophical flaw in communism. You see, Karl Marx, the father of communism, was just smart enough to convince everyone that he knows what he's talking about, just dumb enough to convince everyone that he knows what he's talking about, and too dumb to realize that he doesn't actually know what he's talking about. And I'll explain it to you. If you read Das Kapital as well as the Communist Manifesto, phenomenal books, right? And Karl Marx highlights and actually identifies a number of flaws within what we would call laissez-faire capitalism. And he's absolutely correct, spot on. Every single model we've ever run shows that if you allow laissez-faire capitalism to just run, eventually the rich end up with all the money and everyone else ends up poor. So Karl Marx then envisions a new system. And in this new system, Karl Marx identifies that the problem is greed, right? And this is where he makes his big, fundamental philosophical mistake. He identifies greed as a condition due to scarcity. So according to Karl Marx, if you remove scarcity, if every single human being gets what they need and they don't want for anything else, there will be no greed. And this is why he argues that the state should first take hold of all the means of production, and the state should supply the people with everything that they need. This is where they go, that whole sort of rhyme of from each according to their ability to each according to their need. That's where that whole thing comes from, right? So by supplying everyone with everything they need, you will eventually eradicate human greed. And once the human greed has been eradicated, that's when you can finally give the means of production to the people, because now the people will just live in harmony and no one will be greedy ever again. The reason this is flawed is because human greed is an innate part of the function or of the system. Every single communist government in the history of communism has struggled with this one element. They could never, no matter how hard they tried, no matter how many gulags they had, no matter how many people they killed, they could never get rid of the selfish gene. People are greedy because they're people. And even if you give them enough, there's always going to be some that want more than what anyone else has. And this is why the communist sort of beautiful line is, utopia is just one more massacre away. We just need to kill one more person and then it'll be utopia, because the idea is that we can eventually just eradicate greed. Of course, we can't and we don't. And that is communism's biggest flaw. And that's where I think we get to the government in South Africa truly probably isn't trying to destroy the country on purpose. They're hunting this elusive communist utopian dream. This idea that if they can just continuously take control of the means of production, if they can just supply the people of South Africa with a good life, and if every one of us will just work with them, we will eventually get to this promised land where everyone will be brilliant and life will be good. Now, of course, the ANC has a number of other problems within that model, and that is that there's a number of very greedy people now inside the ANC, which is what complicates matters even more, because the people inside the ANC want communism, but most of them don't want communism because they actually want to make everyone else's lives better. They just want communism because it makes it easier for them to take a lot of stuff from the people. But that isn't the same as what most of you are talking about when you say the government is doing this on purpose. So what does it look like when we say the ANC is actually doing this on purpose? Now, you can still include the communist mindset into this, because in a lot of countries, Russia, for example, famously, the Bolsheviks basically made the country ungovernable until they were elected. And then once they were elected, they just killed everyone that were allies of them once before. So it is a popular strategy, a very popular strategy, is to basically destroy the capitalist system and then slowly but surely replace that capitalist system with a sort of a state-owned system instead. Except we see in South Africa the opposite of that happening. Every single year, bigger and bigger chunks of the state is privatized as the state continues to lose ground in the economy, and as the state continues to fail at actually producing anything of value. So we're actually seeing a reverse of where communism wants to go. And this is one of the reasons I don't necessarily think this is on purpose. I think this is genuinely just a lack of education. The ANC has lost all of the heavyweight communist thinkers that it once had, right? The people that genuinely were smart enough to bring about that communist revolution, they're either dead or retired. And what you have now in the ANC are a bunch of arrogant young people that just want to steal. They only want communism because they want to be able to steal as much as they can, but they don't know how to actually do that. They don't know how to actually bring about this communist utopia. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't do it through violent means, because a lot of communist utopias have been brought about through insane violence, where the government realizes, and that's probably what's going to happen in South Africa as the government starts to realize that their power is waning and they're most likely not going to win the next election. I suspect the ANC will try and make this country ungovernable. I think the problem the ANC is going to run into there is, on the one hand, as I've spoken before, there's just way too many cultures in this country. And usually when a government sort of tries to enact a coup on its people, because governments can also enact coups where they just subvert the democratic system, it usually happens because the government is the government of the majority. And there's a large majority of people that support the government. The problem in South Africa is the ANC doesn't really hold a majority with one racial group. I know people like to say, well, it's black people. But there's no black people. It's every single group in South Africa views themselves as completely different. I grew up in Limpopo, for example, where the Sepedi people absolutely don't view themselves as Zulu or Xhosa or Venda. They're not the same, right? They don't think the same. They don't have the same cultural practices. They don't have the same histories. And so it's going to be very difficult for a government like the ANC to take full control, because they will find it very, very hard to have a large enough collection of people that is willing to grant them all of this power. Even the Zulus, while the Zulus are many, they're not more than the rest of the South Africans. So even if the ANC wanted to get all of the Zulus on their side, they'd still be opposed by a lot of people in the rest of South Africa that would just not go along with it. So it's not clear how the ANC would do that. It's probably more likely that the ANC will just splinter and eventually just split up. I don't know, guys. The truth is, as I said, we're getting into the bowels of super speculation here. I can see a world in which the ANC may try, especially if they think that this might give them ample fingers to point at stuff like the GNU and say, hey, look at how bad things got. You need to vote for us again. The problem is everyone is blaming the ANC anyways for everything that's happening in the GNU. So the ANC isn't walking away from this scot-free in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, I don't know. I know watching this entire video for me to reach the conclusion, I don't know if it's on purpose, but that is genuinely the truth. I don't know if it's on purpose. I'm not entirely sure. The only thing I can see, if it is on purpose, is the ANC has already declared itself an enemy of the people of South Africa. And so it's not on purpose because the ANC wants communism in South Africa. It's on purpose because the ANC have sold out to Iran, to Russia, to China, and they're effectively selling off our economy to the Chinese and to the Russians, saying, you guys can do everything. Our people will just starve, right? We don't care. We'll just give us the checks. In that case, it's treason. But yes, okay, that's probably the one argument I would be able to go, yeah, I can see the ANC doing that. They've been doing that for a while, so why not? But let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think? Do you think it's on purpose? And then more importantly, why? What is the goal that the ANC has in this? I'd love to read your thoughts in that comment section down below. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are a patron or a YouTube channel member, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. To become a patron, just hit the link in the description down below or the join button right below this video for YouTube memberships. Then a massive, massive thank you to all of you for watching until now. If you like what I do and you want to see more people have access to it, just hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and leave a comment because it really helps. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I shall see all of you in the next one. Peace.